If you're offended, you're the parasite. There are people in your life right now who take everything and give nothing. They show up when they need you. They vanish when you need them. They drain your energy, hijack your time, demand your emotional labor, and the moment you stop giving, they brand you. Selfish? They call you cold. They say you've changed. And here's the truth that will make them uncomfortable. You have changed. You've stopped being their host. Machiavelli understood this 500 years ago. He knew that kindness without boundaries is not virtue, it's weakness. And weakness attracts predators. There's a specific type of person who has perfected the art of extraction. They move through life like emotional locusts, draining one person after another, leaving behind exhaustion and resentment. And they do it with such conviction, such apparent need, that you feel guilty for even noticing the pattern. They've learned that crisis opens doors, that urgency bypasses boundaries, that if they can make their problem sound desperate enough, good people will sacrifice themselves to help. And you've been that good person, over and over again. Let's be clear about what we're dealing with. A social parasite is not someone going through a hard time. It's not a friend who needs temporary support. It's not someone who reciprocates when they can. A social parasite is a pattern. It's someone whose entire relationship with you is extractive. They consume your attention, your sympathy, your resources, your peace, and they offer nothing but crisis, complaint, and guilt when you try to pull away. They don't want solutions. They want supply. You are not their friend. You are their feeding ground. Niccolo Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that a ruler must be loved and feared, but if he cannot be both, he must choose fear. Why? Because love without respect becomes exploitation. People will take from you endlessly if there is no consequence. They will drain you, guilt you, manipulate you, and walk away the moment you have nothing left to give. The social parasite operates on this exact principle. They have trained you to feel responsible for their emotional state. They have conditioned you to believe that setting a boundary is cruelty, and you have obeyed. Here's what happens in the court of your own life when you allow parasites to feed. First, they test you. They ask for small favors, a ride, a listening ear, a little money. You give it because you're kind, because you want to help, because you believe relationships require sacrifice. And they learn. They learn that you will say yes. They learn that guilt works on you. They learn that if they frame their need as urgent enough, as tragic enough, you will bend. So the requests escalate, the crises multiply, the drama intensifies, and somehow, it's always your responsibility to fix it. The testing phase is critical to understanding how parasites operate. They're not just asking for help, they're conducting research. Every interaction is data collection. How quickly do you respond? How much can they ask for before you push back? What guilt tactics work best on you? Do you respond more to anger or sadness, to threats or to pleading? They're building a profile of your weaknesses, your pressure points, your emotional triggers. And once they have that map, they will use it ruthlessly. Second, they isolate you. Not physically, emotionally. They monopolize your time and energy so completely that you have nothing left for people who actually reciprocate. Your real friends start to fade because you're always managing someone else's emergency. Your goals get delayed because you're too exhausted to pursue them. Your own needs become background noise because the parasite has convinced you that their pain is always more urgent than your peace. This is not accidental. This is strategy. A parasite cannot afford for you to have other options. If you realize how one-sided this relationship is, you might leave. So they keep you busy, they keep you drained, they keep you guilty. The isolation serves multiple purposes. It prevents you from comparing this relationship to healthier ones, ensures you don't have the energy to invest in reciprocal friendships that might show you what you're missing. It keeps you so focused on their drama that you don't notice your own life deteriorating. And most importantly, it removes your support system. Because if your real friends tried to tell you that this person is using you, you're too exhausted and too defensive to hear it. The parasite has positioned themselves as your primary relationship, and everyone else has become peripheral. Third, they rewrite the narrative. When you finally try to set a boundary, when you say no, when you pull back even slightly, they don't accept it. They escalate. They accuse you of abandoning them. They tell others you've become selfish. They paint themselves as the victim of your cruelty. And here's the key. They believe it. Because in their mind, your purpose is to serve them. Any deviation from that role is betrayal. Machiavelli warned that those who live off others' generosity will always resent the hand that stops feeding them. They don't see you as a person, they see you as a resource, and when a resource stops producing, it becomes the enemy. The narrative rewriting is perhaps their most powerful tool. They will take your completely reasonable boundary and spin it into abandonment. They will take your exhaustion and call it selfishness. They will take your self-preservation and frame it as cruelty. And they will do this so convincingly that even you start to believe it. Even you start to wonder if maybe you are being too harsh, too cold, too selfish, because they've spent months or years training you to distrust your own judgment and defer to theirs. Let's examine the psychology of why this works. Why do competent, intelligent, self-aware people allow themselves to be drained by social parasites? Because we are taught that empathy is infinite, that kindness has no cost, that saying no makes you a bad person. We grow up hearing that real friends show up no matter what, that love means sacrifice, that boundaries are selfish, so when someone positions their needs as life or death, we feel morally obligated to respond. We override our exhaustion, our resentment, our intuition, because we've been conditioned to believe that our discomfort is less important than their feelings. But here's the reality. Machiavelli understood, and we refuse to accept. Not everyone deserves your energy. Some people are black holes. They take and take and take, and no amount of giving will ever fill them. Because the problem is not that they lack resources. The problem is that they have built an identity around being needy. Crisis is their currency. Victimhood is their power. And you, with your empathy and your guilt, are their endless supply. They don't want to get better. They want you to keep saving them. Because being saved is easier than saving yourself. The brutal truth is this. Every minute you spend managing someone else's self-inflicted chaos is a minute stolen from your own life. Every ounce of energy you pour into someone who refuses to help themselves is energy you will never get back. And the parasite knows this. They know that if they can keep you focused on their problems, you won't have time to notice your own. They know that if they can keep you feeling responsible, you won't ask why they never take responsibility. This is not friendship, this is a con. And you've been running it on yourself. Machiavelli said that men are so simple and so much driven by immediate needs that he who deceives will always find someone willing to be deceived. The social parasite deceives you with urgency, with emotion, with the illusion that this time will be different, that this crisis is the last one, that once you help them through this, they'll finally get their life together. But it never happens, because the crisis is the point. The crisis is how they control you. And as long as you respond to it, they will manufacture more. Think about the patterns. The parasite always has a reason, a tragic backstory, a streak of bad luck, a world that's unfair to them specifically. And none of it is ever their fault. They're always the victim, always the exception, always deserving of one more chance. They've perfected the art of making their problems sound urgent enough that you can't say no without feeling like a monster. And you fall for it, not because you're stupid, but because you're good. And they've learned to weaponize your goodness against you. Here's what most people don't understand about parasites. They're not consciously malicious. They genuinely believe they deserve your help. They genuinely believe that your boundaries are cruel. They genuinely believe that if you cared, you would drop everything to save them. Again, because they've constructed an entire worldview where other people exist to solve their problems, where your time, your energy, your resources are communal property, where saying no is an act of violence. And if you try to explain why this is insane, they'll twist your words until you're the one apologizing. The parasite operates in a reality distortion field. In their version of events, they're always trying their best. They're always one break away from turning it all around. They're always the hero of their own story, and you're either their loyal supporter or their villain. There's no middle ground. No space for you to have your own needs. No recognition that you're a separate person with a finite capacity to give. In their world, you exist to serve. And the moment you stop, you've betrayed the fundamental terms of the relationship. This worldview is not just wrong, it's parasitic. It's by design. Because if they acknowledge that you have your own life, your own struggles, your own limits, they would have to moderate their demands. They would have to reciprocate. They would have to consider whether their constant crises are reasonable to impose on another person. And they can't do that because their entire survival strategy depends on finding people who will carry the weight of their choices. So they construct a reality where you're obligated to help, where your refusal is betrayal, where their needs always trump yours. So what's the solution? What's the ruthless boundary? That ends this pattern instantly. You stop feeding them. Not gradually, not diplomatically, not with explanations or apologies or second chances. You cut the supply. You stop answering the 3 a.m. crisis texts. You stop rearranging your schedule for their emergencies. You stop offering solutions they'll never implement. You stop feeling guilty for having boundaries. And most importantly, you stop explaining yourself. Because the moment you explain, you're negotiating. And you don't negotiate with parasites. Here's what this looks like in practice. When they reach out with their next crisis, you don't engage. You don't argue. You don't justify. You simply stop being available. If they ask why you've changed, you don't explain that they've been draining you for years. You don't list examples. You don't try to make them understand. Because they already understand. They've always understood. They just didn't care. So you give them nothing. No explanation, no closure, no final conversation where they get to guilt you one last time. You just disappear from their supply chain. And here's what will happen. They will escalate. They will reach out more. They will manufacture bigger crises. They will tell you that you're abandoning them in their darkest hour. They will involve mutual friends. They will post vague social media messages about betrayal. They will do everything in their power to pull you back in because you were their primary source. And now you're gone. This is not because they love you. This is because they need you. And when you understand the difference, you stop feeling guilty. The escalation phase is predictable and revealing. If this person genuinely cared about you as a person, they would respect your boundary. They would ask what they did wrong. They would give you space. They would reflect on the relationship. But the parasite does none of this. Instead, they ramp up the manipulation. They make the crises bigger, more dramatic, more urgent. They try to force you back into the role of savior by making the consequences of your absence seem catastrophic. And if that doesn't work, they turn vicious, because you're not a person to them, you're a function, and broken functions get replaced or discarded. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must learn to be not good when necessity demands it. This is that necessity. You are not being cruel. You are being self-preserving. You are not abandoning someone in need. You are refusing to enable someone who has made you responsible for problems they created. There is a profound difference between supporting someone who is struggling and becoming the permanent solution to someone who refuses to help themselves. The first is compassion. The second is cowardice. Let's talk about the guilt, because that's what keeps people trapped. You'll feel like you're doing something wrong. You'll replay conversations. You'll wonder if maybe this time was real, if maybe they actually needed you, if maybe you're overreacting. And here's the test. Ask yourself if they ever show up for you. Not in the ways they say they would, in the ways that actually matter. Do they remember your struggles? Do they check in when you're quiet? Do they offer anything that costs them something? Or do they only appear when they need something from you? If the answer is the latter, you already know what they are. You're just afraid to act on it. The guilt you feel is not organic, it's programmed. The parasite has spent months or years training you to feel responsible for their well-being. They've conditioned you to associate their pain with your obligation. They've made you believe that if you don't save them, no one will. And here's the truth they'll never tell you. They don't want to be saved. They want to be enabled. They want someone to carry the weight of their choices so they never have to. And every time you respond to the crisis, you reinforce the lesson that crisis works. Think about what you're teaching them when you keep showing up. You're teaching them that your boundaries don't matter, that your time is less valuable than their chaos, that if they just make the situation urgent enough, dramatic, enough guilt-inducing enough, you will fold. You're teaching them that you are controllable, and they will use that knowledge until you have nothing left to give. This is not love. This is conditioning, and you are both the subject and the architect. The conditioning runs deeper than most people realize. Every time you drop everything for their crisis, you're programming yourself to believe that your needs are less important. Every time you accept their guilt trip, you're teaching yourself that setting boundaries makes you a bad person. Every time you ignore your intuition that something is wrong with this dynamic, you're training yourself to distrust your own judgment. The parasite isn't just draining your energy, they're rewiring your entire sense of self-worth and obligation. And the longer it continues, the harder it becomes to remember what a healthy relationship even looks like. The most powerful thing you can do is reclaim your time and energy for people who actually deserve it, for relationships that are reciprocal, for goals that matter, for rest that you've earned. The social parasite has convinced you that your value lies in your availability, that your worth is measured by how much you can endure. That setting a boundary makes you heartless, but the truth is the opposite. You are not heartless for refusing to be drained. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. You are not cold for recognizing a pattern and choosing to end it. Here's the final piece that Machiavelli understood and most people miss. The parasite will survive without you. They always do, because you were never their only source. You were just the most reliable one. The moment you're gone, they'll find someone else, another empath, another people pleaser, another person who hasn't learned this lesson yet. And that's not your responsibility. You are not obligated to be consumed so someone else can avoid the consequences of their own choices. You are not a sacrifice. You are not a resource. You are a person, and your life belongs to you. The courts of Renaissance Italy were filled with people who mistook access for loyalty, advisors who appeared indispensable until the prince stopped needing them, allies who swore devotion until the favors stopped flowing. Machiavelli watched these people closely, and he saw that their affection was always conditional. It lasted exactly as long as the benefits did. The moment the prince asserted his own interests, these so-called allies revealed themselves. They didn't disappear quietly. They turned vicious. They spread rumors. They aligned with enemies, because they were never allies at all. They were opportunists, and the same is true in your life. When you stop feeding the social parasite, you'll discover who they really are. Not in their words, but in their actions. They won't wish you well. They won't respect your boundary. They won't quietly move on. They'll lash out, because you were never a person to them. You were a function. And when you stop performing that function, they don't see growth or self-respect. They see betrayal. Let them. Their anger is proof you made the right choice. Machiavelli also observed that people fear loss more than they value gain. The parasite doesn't fear losing you because they care about you. They fear losing you because they care about what you provide. The rides, the money, the emotional labor, the validation, the audience for their drama. The moment those benefits disappear, so does their interest. And if you need proof, watch what happens when you stop giving. They don't ask how you're doing. They don't wonder if you're okay. They ask why you're not answering, why you're being difficult, why you've changed. Because your well-being was never the point. Your utility was. This is the difference between a relationship and a transaction. In a relationship, both people give and receive. Both people show up. Both people care about the other's well-being independent of what they can extract. In a transaction, one person provides and the other consumes. And the moment the provider stops providing, the consumer moves on. The parasite is not your friend, they are your customer. And they're angry because you've gone out of business. So here's your ruthless law, drawn directly from Machiavelli's cold strategic lens. Protect your energy like you protect your life, because it is your life. Every relationship is either additive or extractive. It either gives you something real or it costs you something vital. And if you can't tell the difference, look at how you feel after spending time with someone. Energized or exhausted, inspired or drained, respected or used. Your body knows. Your intuition knows. You've just been taught to ignore it. Stop ignoring it. Stop ignoring. Stop making excuses for people who wouldn't make time for you. Stop carrying people who wouldn't carry you. Stop feeding parasites who see your kindness as weakness and your boundaries as cruelty. You don't owe anyone access to you. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't owe anyone a second chance when they've already shown you exactly who they are. Machiavelli said it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But here's the modern translation. It is better to be respected than used. And if someone can't respect your boundaries, they don't belong in your life. The people. The who matter will understand. The people who don't will reveal themselves. And when they do, thank them. They've just saved you years of wasted energy. Now take that energy and build something that actually matters. Invest it in people who reciprocate, in goals that move you forward, in peace that you've earned. Because your life is too short and too valuable to spend it being someone else's endless supply. You're not a resource. You're not a therapist. You're not a savior. You're a person with limits, with needs, with a finite amount of time on this planet. And the moment you start protecting that time like it's sacred, everything changes. Let's address the one objection that always comes up. What if they really need help this time? What if this crisis is real? What if cutting them off causes actual harm? Here's the answer. If someone has cried wolf 100 times, you are not responsible for the 101st time. If someone has built a pattern of manufactured emergencies, you are not obligated to investigate each new crisis to determine its validity. That burden is not yours. They created it by abusing your trust. And the consequence of that abuse is that you no longer believe them. That's not cruelty, that's cause and effect. Furthermore, real people in real crisis don't weaponize guilt. They don't manipulate. They don't demand. They ask. They appreciate. They reciprocate when they can. They take responsibility for their situation even while asking for help. The parasite does none of this. The parasite blames. The parasite demands. The parasite makes you feel like a villain for having limits. And that's how you know. That's how you distinguish between someone struggling and someone exploiting. One respects you. The other uses you. One is temporary. The other is a lifestyle. You've been told your whole life that walking away makes you a bad person, that loyalty means enduring, that real love is unconditional. But here's what they don't tell you. Unconditional love does not mean unconditional access. You can care about someone and still refuse to be drained by them. You can wish someone well and still remove them from your life. You can have compassion for someone's struggle and still refuse to make it your responsibility. These things are not contradictory. They're necessary, because you cannot pour from an empty cup. And the parasite will drain you until there's nothing left. Machiavelli understood that power is not just about what you do, it's about what you refuse to tolerate. A prince who tolerates betrayal invites more betrayal. A prince who tolerates incompetence becomes surrounded by incompetence, and a person who tolerates parasites becomes a host. The moment you stop tolerating it, the moment you enforce the boundary, everything shifts. The parasite loses power. Your life becomes yours again. And the people who actually deserve your energy finally have space to receive it. So if this message offends you, ask yourself why. Ask yourself if you're angry because it's untrue or because it's uncomfortably accurate. Ask yourself if you're defending someone who would defend you, or if you're defending a pattern that's been costing you for years. And if the answer makes you uneasy, good. That discomfort, the beginning of change. That's the moment you stop being a host and start being a person with boundaries. That's the moment the parasite loses its power. And that's the moment your life becomes yours again. You will lose people when you set boundaries. That's guaranteed. But here's what most people don't realize until it's too late. You're not losing people. You're losing parasites. You're losing users. You're losing people who were never really there for you in the first place. And yes, it will feel like loss, because you've spent years believing that their presence, however toxic, was better than their absence. But that's the lie. Their absence is not emptiness, it's space. Space for better people, space for reciprocal relationships, space for your own goals, your own peace, your own life. The parasite occupied that space, and gave you nothing in return. Now you're reclaiming it, and when you finally cut the supply and walk away, you'll realize something profound. You don't miss them. You miss the person you thought they were. You miss the relationship you hoped you had. You miss the fantasy. But the reality? The reality was exhausting. The reality was one-sided. The reality was a slow drain on everything that made you who you are. And now that it's gone, you can finally breathe. You can finally build. You can finally live without someone else's crisis dictating your every move. That's not loss. That's liberation. The parasite will tell a different story. They'll tell people you abandoned them, that you were never really a friend, that you're selfish, cold, heartless. Let them, because everyone who matters will see the truth. They'll see that you set a boundary. They'll see that you protected yourself. They'll see that you refuse to be consumed, and if they don't see that, if they side with the parasite, then they were never your people either. They were just waiting for their turn to feed. Machiavelli's final lesson on this is simple. The strong do not explain themselves to the weak. You don't owe the parasite a dissertation on why you're leaving. You don't owe them closure. You don't owe them one last chance to guilt you into staying. You owe them nothing because they gave you nothing. And the moment you internalize that, the moment you truly understand that you are not responsible for people who refuse to help themselves, you become free. Free from guilt. Free from manipulation. Free from the endless cycle of crisis and rescue that defined the relationship. You become sovereign over your own life again, and that is the most ruthless, most necessary, most powerful thing you can do. There's a moment that comes after you've finally cut off a parasite. A moment of clarity that feels almost surreal. You wake up one morning and realize you haven't thought about their crisis in days. You check your phone and there's no panicked message demanding your immediate attention. You make plans with a real friend and you don't have to cancel because someone else's emergency took priority. You invest time in a goal that matters to you and you're not too exhausted to follow through. And in that moment, you realize what you've been missing. Your own life. The life you were supposed to be living while you were busy being someone else's support system. This clarity doesn't come immediately. There's usually a withdrawal period, days or weeks where you feel guilty, where you second-guess yourself, where you wonder if you made a mistake. The parasite has trained you so thoroughly that even in their absence, their voice echoes in your head. You'll find yourself justifying your boundary to an imaginary audience. You'll rehearse explanations you'll never give. You'll check their social media to see if they've posted about you, if they're okay, if they've found someone else to drain. And each time you catch yourself doing this, you need to recognize it for what it is. The last vestiges of the conditioning they installed. Breaking free from a parasite is not just about removing them from your life. It's about removing their voice from your head. It's about unlearning the guilt responses they programmed into you. It's about rebuilding your sense of what you deserve from relationships, because they didn't just take your time and energy. They rewired your expectations. They taught you that relationships are supposed to be one-sided, that your role is to give endlessly while asking for nothing, that expressing needs makes you selfish. And those lessons don't disappear just because they do. The recovery process requires conscious effort. You need to actively remind yourself that your needs matter, that your time has value, that reciprocity is not optional in relationships. You need to practice saying no to small requests from other people, not because those requests are unreasonable, but because you need to rebuild the neural pathways that allow you to set boundaries without drowning in guilt. You need to invest in relationships that feel easy, where giving and receiving flow naturally, where you don't finish every interaction feeling drained. And you need to be patient with yourself when the old patterns try to resurface. One of the most insidious things parasites do is make you doubt your perception of reality. They're so skilled at reframing situations, at making their needs seem urgent and your boundaries seem cruel, that you start to question your own judgment. You start to think maybe you are being too harsh, maybe you are expecting too much, maybe you are the problem. And that doubt lingers even after they're gone. You'll find yourself in new relationships, healthy ones, and you'll still catch yourself over-explaining, over-apologizing, over-giving, because the parasite trained you to believe that anything less makes you a bad person. This is why Machiavelli's cold analysis is so necessary. He didn't indulge in sentiment or self-deception. He looked at patterns of human behavior and called them what they were. He recognized that some people are takers, that they will drain resources until there are none left, and that the only rational response is to cut them off, not out of cruelty, out of strategy, out of self-preservation, out of respect for your own finite life and the people who actually deserve your investment. The parasite wants you to see boundaries as heartless. Machiavelli understood that boundaries are power, and power is what allows you to build something meaningful instead of being consumed by those who build nothing. The final realization that comes after you've successfully removed a parasite from your life is this: you are never helping them. Not really, because helping someone means enabling their growth, supporting their progress, standing beside them as they work to improve their situation. What you were doing was enabling their stagnation. You were making it comfortable for them to stay exactly as they were. You were removing the natural consequences of their choices, and in doing so, you were removing their motivation to change. Every time you saved them, you delayed the moment when they would have to save themselves. And that's not kindness. That's interference. You weren't their friend, you were their obstacle. The obstacle between them and the rock bottom that might finally wake them up.